All right, everyone. I'm Nick Dillon with I'm a BI consultant with Pragmatic Works. I've been working with Pragmatic for about, excuse me, 1 year now, and I've been working with BI for about 5 years now. A little bit about me. I'm just moved to Columbia, South Carolina from Charlotte, North Carolina, and currently I'm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So kind of been all over the place here recently, but glad to be with you guys here on the webinar today. And I put this together for, it's called a hurdle helper for SQL Server Analysis Services in multidimensional mode. So let me go to our agenda here. And let me first say that I put these slides together and picked out these hurdles for the person who perhaps is just starting with analysis services. And these are the common errors that pop up that may not, be very intuitive on how to resolve. Microsoft sometimes, is not very descriptive with their error messages, and this is going to help the very novice developers get started and clear the hurdles or common hurdles that we commonly occur with analysis services and multidimensional mode. So I've broken this down into just design hurdles. There's processing hurdles and performance hurdles I was going to get into, but I just narrowed this down to the design hurdles, and I've broken that down further to the data sources, dimensions, and cubes. Different hurdles we can we commonly see in each area of our cubes here. So the first and by far the most difficult thing for users to, and also let me describe this whole session here. I'll go through these slides and kind of give a lecture on each one of these guys, and then hopefully as I'm going along you can kind of queue up your questions in your mind, and then if we have time at the end of the session I will have a question and answer session, and I'll see if I can answer any of your questions. So first, this is probably what I'll spend the most time on, is trying to explain the whole impersonation mode within analysis services. And before I do that, and since this is aimed towards the novice developers in analysis services, it's important to understand that analysis services is a database. It's a multidimensional database, and it maintains a connection to its data source. It can be SQL Server or Oracle or what have you, just any data source. But there's this whole concept of processing, and by that, what processing means is that analysis services connects to the data source, right? Pulls that data and runs aggregations and builds indexes based off of that, builds hierarchies, and just really structures that data into a multidimensional format to make it very available for analysis for the end users. So the end users will be able to slice and dice the data any way they want, and it's all about pulling information from the database, not necessarily updating that information or inserting it or deleting it or anything like that. All we're concerned about from a cube is pulling that information, analyzing it. So this whole concept of processing actually goes out and gets our relational data or wherever it's at and pulls it and cubes it. So obviously, if you work with databases, you need a database connection or connection string to connect to your data sources. So this is just one particular example that I have laid out here. And I'm going to assume that we're connecting to a SQL Server data source. And this is just a relational database management system. This is not a cube that we're connecting to. We're pulling for that data from this relational system into our cube. And then, so we have to develop our cube in data tools, right? And then we eventually deploy it to SQL Server Analysis Services 2012. So there's two different authentication requests going on here. We have one authentication request to the SQL Server data source from SQL Server data tools. And I'll show you this later after I get through with this slide of how you set up your data source connection, but it's pretty straightforward. You set up your connection string, and it's going to use that to connect to the data source. There's also an authentication request after you make the deployment to the analysis services server, right? We're not in data tools anymore. There's another authentication request when the cube is processed, and that behaves a little bit differently than it does within data tools. So this particular example, I have Contoso developer 83007, right? So this is developer 83007 on the Contoso domain, and he has a connection string set up with Windows authentication to this SQL Server data source. He does not have a specific user defined in his connection string. It's just Windows authentication. So anytime the user, hits the test connection button or just explores his data within data tools, it's going to use his Contoso developer 83007 Windows identity to connect to that data source. Generally that's already been set up for him. He has Management Studio access to it. He can browse the data, and everything's fine and dandy. However, when that developer goes to deploy to Analysis Services, what happens is those credentials, the data source connection string, and the impersonation mode get copied to the Analysis Services 2012 server. Now things start to behave a little bit differently. His identity is not used, but if he has left the impersonation mode in a default setting, the service account will be used as the Windows identity to connect to the SQL Server data source. If that service does not have access to the data source, he'll get an error during processing saying, access denied. So it's important to understand this, because it's not the connection strings everybody's familiar with, but the impersonation mode in Analysis Services allows you to change that. So let me go to the next slide here and explain the impersonation modes. So some of you may have seen this dialog box, and there's 4 different ways that we can impersonate our Windows user. The first one I'll talk about is the third one, which is user credentials of the current user. And I have noticed that's a red arrow. Generally, you do not want to use this, mainly because 99.5% of the time,